course, we have a special guest. It's also joining our panel, also bearded. He is Mike Griggs from Strings and Beyond. Mike, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm here. Thank you for having me.
Mike, super pumped to have you here. Mike and I are good friends, go back, way back. I've been after Mike for years now, literally, to redesign his site. He finally gave in and did a redesign, rebranding, really, for Strings and Beyond. Mike's going to be talking about that, about his business in general, and give some merchant perspective on what all's going on there. So let's go to the next slide here and just talk about Strings and Beyond. So Mike, just tell us about the business. Tell us about the industry and just get us caught up on your brand.
Well, you know, at Strings and Beyond, we sell guitar strings and accessories, small accessories. And you can see right there at the top some of our top selling points. We have a competitive musical industry, but the things that we're able to offer as a small business are fast turnaround times. We're flexible. We have free shipping over $35. The landscape has changed a lot in this area, so I might actually talk about that. But and then everything we do comes with a personal touch. At least that's our intention. So all of the interactions with customers, you know, whether it's the order that's been that we're shipping, that sort of thing. There's always a personal touch. So and I won't go into further. I think a lot of people probably are familiar with our site, and I could talk for hours about that, but I'll pause there.
Well, Mike, you know, of course I was kidding you, but there was also some truth in that about holding off on the redesign. What was the straw that broke the camel's back? Why did you decide to finally give in and do it this time?
Well, as a small business, I mean, we're always fighting with expenses and looking at what we can do and what we can't do. And you know, with the rebranding, I knew that for the longest time I wanted you guys to do it, but it was just one of those things where we, you know, other things pile up, like back-end software that has to be taken care of and things like that. So a lot of it is financially driven, but you know, I got to a point where I talked with you, I guess it was I saw you a year ago in Chicago maybe, and
yep.
I just got to a point where I was like, well, it's not going to happen this year, but maybe next year. And then
right.
After I left that conversation, I start looking around at the landscape, and I'm scratching my head, and I'm like, if we don't do something, then we're just going to ride this. That previous website that you showed before, it converted well,
right.
But it unfortunately it's you know, that little pretty pony, we're just going to ride it straight into the ground. As you know, all
right.
the other brands and businesses, whether it's Home Depot, Microsoft, Yahoo, Guitar Center, our competitors, everybody's changing. Everybody is moving, and if you're not changing with the times and keeping things updated, then you will become outdated.
Well, dive a little bit deeper into that, the kind of competitive landscape that you find yourself in. I mean, they all have fancy websites and doing specific things. Talk to us about the strategy there with the new site, Mike.
Okay, so we do have some pretty exciting tools coming that we haven't quite dialed in yet, but certainly with our website, the whole intention with the design was to make it easier for customers to drill down into at the product level, and certainly with some like the acoustic guitar strings, for example. We now
right.
have the Nextopia filtering where customers can drill down by brand, they can drill down by the wrap wire type and things like that to be able to help them get to their products. Whereas before, we just had 500 sets of guitar strings, and you know, hopefully they'd find something. We would put it towards the top, and I mean, we sold everything that we put on the website, but we weren't necessarily proactive. We still have
right.
a long way to go. You know, we went through this seven-month redesign with you guys, and it was an amazing process. We rebranded our entire thing from the ground up. But as we're stepping into the next phase, you quickly realize that we have so much more to be able to bring to our customers, to be able to help them find stuff easier and get through the site easier and check out. For the past 3 weeks, I have been fanatically working through our checkout to make it easier to get through. And Don's looking at it now. He's helped me. He's helped me over the past 2 or 3 weeks. I'm like, Don, this small little tiny thing I need, and can you help me with? And you know, thankfully he's been able to do some things. So it's it's an ongoing process, an ongoing refinement, and I see that even more. I see that more now, even after we did this rebranding. It's like, you guys, we did the redesign, and then you pushed us off, and now it's like, all right, we gotta dial in the sales, we gotta hitch up the ropes. So does that answer your question?
It does, and one of the things that I know with the redesign, of course, we're talking about navigation and filtering. You mentioned Nextopia. We looked at that here on the live site with some of the filtering that you've got. But talk to us about the decisions to streamline your navigation. I know that was a pretty big challenge. You had a very different navigational path before. Talk to us about that, Mike.
I think a lot of that did stem from our competition and really from looking around at the other landscape, the Guitar Center, Sweetwater, Musician's Friend. I mean, these guys are really they're all somewhat of Walmarts in our industry, and they have everything. We're in the niche, and we have more products than they do, but if you were to go to each of these sites, you would see that they all have advanced filtering to help customers get to the products. And this is one thing that, even 5-6 years ago, we tried it. We didn't do a good job of it. We tried to improve it, but we never really focused on it. And I just knew that with this new website redesign, we had to at least come up with the industry and get on board with some of the basic tools that people are using to be able to drill down through products. We do have a really cool tool coming, and JT, I'm pretty sure he's aware of it, but it's kind of like a little string finder to help people to kind of help new customers get to the different products, to kind of ask them questions. Well, you play acoustic, do you play electric, that sort of thing. And I would encourage all kinds of store owners to try to think outside the box, and from a usability standpoint and a navigation standpoint, try to think like your customer. Try to think like your customer to figure out, all right, if I'm coming to this site, I don't know anything about this stuff. Where do I start? And so I would encourage everybody to start thinking critically in that way, to figure out how they could improve their site to help their customer get the stuff they're looking for.
Now, Mike, we looked at Guitar Center. We pulled that up briefly, and that site is not responsive. Your new site is responsive. Talk to us about how that went and kind of the way that you had to think about a redesign, because you've done other redesigns for some other stores that you've done, but they were fixed with. How did that change things in doing a responsive site?
Well, like I said, we talked a year ago, and you were selling me on this whole responsive thing, and I'm like, okay, sure, we want to be mobile friendly, but how important is this? And that was in June last year. And of course, when we stepped into when I went back and thought about and realized that we had to do something, and you look around and see what's going on, I realized that okay, it's a no-brainer. We can't just have a mobile site with the tablet. I use my tablet all the time. I knew that the landscape was changing, and the data's there. Everybody can go in and look at their analytics and see the types of places people are browsing from. So when I came to you, it was an easy decision. I was like, we had to rebrand our site, and it was a no-brainer to step into a responsive design. And I mean, sure enough, we rolled out our site at the end of February, I think officially, and I think Google had already made their announcements about mobile getting and stuff, but the timing was just right. I mean, the timing was right for us to go through this process. We did have a mobile site before, and thanks to Yahoo, they're doing some things to make sure everybody's covered. But it was the right timing. But as you look around the landscape, look at competitors, and you realize that if you don't get on board with at least the basic stuff, you are going to become quickly outdated.
Right. Well, speaking of outdated, one question I had for you is about the logo. I think a lot of people listening in can relate to this, but you had a logo that you've used for a good while. I know it had some permutations before we did this redesign, but it's a pretty big change with what we did with the new logo here, and I know that was a big challenge. Talk to us about how the team received that and some of the creative that went into that, Mike.
It was tough. The logo that was there for 12 years, I created that very first weekend before we started, when we started the business, and I was comfortable with those colors, and we had been looking at that thing, all of us, for 12 years. I'd gotten a point over the years where I realized that you go through these different phases of a small business, and it's like, hey, we sell widgets online, and then it's like, well, if we get more traffic, we could sell more widgets. And then it's like, okay, well, if we sell more widgets, we get more revenue. And then, years later, it's like, well, it's about the profit. And then the next step is it's about the cash flow. So you go through these, and I don't know, everybody's on a different level, okay? And I think everybody in there can relate to a little bit of that. But when you get to those later stages and you realize that, it is it's about the bottom line in the end, then
right.
You are able to somewhat detach yourself from some of the personal emotions and feelings about the website design. And I got to a point where it's like, either I've got to make some serious changes, I have to detach myself, or I very may be riding this pony into the ground. And
right.
so I came to that realization, and that's why I was able to let it all go. With the rest of my team, we had family members and partners and that sort of thing, and we got through it. There was a month or two of some difficult back and forth, and I was very careful about making sure everybody was able to give input. That's important. If everybody's not giving input, then you get to a point where you may not be moving forward as a partnership. But so I would recommend everybody do that when you're making some of these important changes. Even spouses and close family friends that have been part of your lives for a long time, let them give you a little bit of input. You don't have to use it, but at least let them know that their voice is being heard. I would encourage that. They'll support you and your business and what you're doing even more. So it was hard. We got through it though, and I think we came up with an amazing design. So thank you, JT. I've said this many times, but thank your team. They did a great job with the design. So.
Well, thank you very much. I'll pass that along for sure, and I'm sure they're out there listening as well. So
let's get past the little PC stuff that we're talking about here. So Mike was talking about a very difficult time with this logo, and JT, I know you're healthy. You're sitting here today. Your designer, Justin, that worked on this, now he suffered a coronary by doing this logo, right? Is that right? Is he recovering from the?
He's doing better. Yeah.
Okay. How was it getting feedback not only from Mike, but also all of his family, friends, his neighbor, the neighbor's dog? How was that, just kind of doing design by committee, with that, JT? Was that a pleasant experience for you? Or?
No, well, to be honest, I mean, that's a little, when you pull in everybody. But Mike, I think like you said, I think it's important, especially for the store owner to get input from people, but whether or not you actually use it or not. I think, us working back and forth, I know we had quite a few iterations, back and forth, but I'm very pleased with how the logo turned out. And it's just like what we do with, the clients. We take their feedback and, we kind of drill it down and figure out what's most important to them about that logo and make sure that's kind of carried across.
Right. And in all seriousness, I mean, listen, any time that you're looking at making drastic changes, whether it's your logo, the navigation, like I would agree. I think you've got to, solicit feedback from people. It might tell me if you agree, but I think that ultimately the store owner or the principal has got to own the decision. They've got to be, it's got to ultimately be their decision. Certainly solicit feedback. Mike, ultimately you made the call. Is that fair to say? Is that?
Well, I know. I have to say that my three partners, we're essentially on equal footing.
Well, yeah, partners.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, the three of us made the final decision, and I did actually. I just instant messaged you our contact sheet. It may be interesting for all the people to see that. I don't know if you have access to that, Eric, but let me see. And that was in the system.
Okay.
Because you like all these people looking will get an idea. Okay, well, what did all these variations look like? And then I can, and then they might get an idea. Well, if they come to do a redesign, these are the types of things that they might see. And then we had to, we whittled around back and forth, and we got to this eventual design that we were all happy with.
Okay, everybody can take a look at that. But let's go on with the rest. Mike, can you stick around for the rest of the show?
I'm here. I'm just going to sit back and you guys do your thing. And I guarantee you I will learn something from the next 20 minutes.
Guaranteed. And guys, if you have any questions for Mike as a merchant about what he's gone through with the site or just his perspective on any of the stuff we're talking about, please address that or anything else into the questions bar there. And Tara, you can review that, right?
Yeah.
All right, but Mike, Don, we did the practice run through yesterday. I actually have a surprise for you guys. I don't know if you knew this about me. Mike, you actually inspired me, and Don, you to a degree, to start my own e-commerce store. Did you know that, guys? Did you know that?
No.
I'm scared.
Yeah. So and listen, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with this. I'll admit, I want to come clean. JT is the real talent behind UI Studios. I barely know how to use MS Paint, for stuff. And so, a lot of what I do, I just kind of take credit for stuff like with JT and all. But what you're seeing here, Tara, is my own effort to start an e-commerce store. And so, Don, in kind of a switcheroo, changeroo, I'd like for you to critique my store. Don, would you do that for me and kind of give me some feedback on what you're seeing here?
Sure, I'm afraid, but sure.
All right, so let's go on. So what you're seeing here is my first attempt at an e-commerce store. It's called Eric's Awesome Clothes. Mike, any kind of just initial gut level reaction to what you're seeing there?
I actually think this is a really good idea.
Really?
I'm passionate about good ideas. The font face though up there, all those mixed colors, I'm not digging that, but I like the direction. Colorful logo could be awesome, but the current type colors are not.
Well, my thing is, look, I mean, I wanted to put my money where my mouth is. I critique everybody else. I'm pretty hard on them. So I just want to show them that, look, I know what I'm doing, with this store. And I think that's evident on what you're seeing here. But, one of the early complaints that I got was about the product photography. That's actually me in the first thumbnail. A lot of people don't want to see me with my shirt off. But fortunately, I sell shirts. I was thinking about the Hulk shirt with the parachute pants. But one of the early things, Don, before you start whipping into me too hard with the site, was the left nav, okay? So my first thing is like, all right, I sell so many types of T-shirts, right? I got red shirts and green shirts and blue shirts and all these kind of pants and jackets and whatnot. I didn't know how to consolidate this thing. So the first thing that I did was kind of break it up, right? So I put these little yellow bars. Some of the other sites that we're reviewing today have done something similar, right, Tara? So I did that. And so this is kind of the first iteration, so let's go to the second one. So this one here, I consolidated, Don. We're talking a lot about consolidation here. And so I got rid of the left nav, and I went to T-shirts, pants, jackets, and then I added some browsing categories, new arrivals, and clearance. And you saw, can you go back real quick? Okay, now I have Norton secured because, I want people to feel safe on this site. If they don't already feel like this is a very trustworthy design, I wanted to have Norton secured just kind of put me over the top with that, But yeah, so here, what this allowed me to do, I didn't have the merchandising ability for the big graphic for parachute pants. That was it. And so this will allow me to put a skinny jeans super sale and the Valentine's Day shirt bonanza and another thumbnail. So the next thing here, go real quick. Okay, so, I put all of the various T-shirts. It's just a standard CSS layout, Don, and the T-shirts there. And so, but I felt like, look, this stuff is visual, right? It's got panache. It's got just it's colorful. So what I did next is I put it into this mega menu here, right? So here it kind of visually showcases all the red shirts, green shirts, blue shirts. And then, my big seller, JT is wearing it right now, is the Hulk costume shirt.
It goes great with parachute pants.
It does. I mean, especially green.
I have one a pair right now.
Purple.
It's like wearing nothing at all. It's awesome.
We're the real deal here. But so Don, give it to me. Like, don't hold anything back. What are you seeing here as far as the site? Mike, feel free to chime in too. What are you thinking, guys?
Wow, I can barely breathe. You're cutting edge 2001.
Right.
I think I need some parachute pants, that's for sure.
Right.
But, yeah, I don't even know where to start with this, Eric. I love you dearly, and you're a good friend, but yeah, I don't know how to not offend you by any thought.
All right, well, so that means you like it then, is that right? Is it?
Oh, it has got to be one of my top 10 sites now.
Okay. I've not yet introduced filtering. I'm considering that. Nextopia and I are talking about the site. But, Don, in all seriousness, the reason why I'm showing this is that, a lot of people struggle with the left nav to top nav. And one of the biggest questions we get is, all right, why is there such a move to the top nav, right? And so I did this to kind of showcase a principle that consolidation is key. Whatever you do in terms of usability, in terms of navigation, you have to consolidate. Don, is that Is that a fair point? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think especially, a lot of people, used to a left nav, and for me, it's not so much that left nav is bad, it's that doing a top nav a lot of times forces you to do what you don't do on a left nav. I've seen so many left navs where the thing scrolls on forever or makes people read 400 different sections to try to find what they need. And that's my biggest issue, is it's not even so much the left versus top, it's just making it usable.
Exactly. And so, with that said, let's talk about top versus left navigation. JT, what are your thoughts in general? I think a lot, this is a site that we did, we actually got beef jerky as a prize, right?
We did.
We're happy with the design. They sent some awesome jerky that we launched on here at UI. But of course, the old site here, Smoked Meats, is showing that left nav, and they moved up to the top nav, which this is not quite on par with my design, but it's somewhat, of quality. But JT, talk to us in general about the left and top nav and kind of the move towards that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, almost just like Don said, I've seen a lot of sites, and I mean, even the ones we're going to review here today, where they just have a very long left nav, and it forces the customer to scroll down the entire length of the homepage, for example, to read all the links. And at that point, they're going to have to scroll all the way back up to the top to read the actual or see the actual content on the page. But aside from that, aesthetically, I think it goes for a much cleaner look. You said it forces that consolidation. It's much easier to absorb when I'm only reading, 5 to 7 links, for example, as opposed to like 30 or 40 in the left nav.
Right, because if you've got a left nav, then you have vertical space that you're looking. You can put 40 links if you need to. Whereas if you move to top, because you have the left to right restriction there, you have to be judicious about the categories that you include there.
Right, and nobody wants to be overwhelmed either.
Exactly. And so another thing too is if you're talking about a responsive site, you have to be judicious. You have to be very, you have to get your editing pen out to really think about how we can do this. So let's go to the next one here.
Eric, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. One thing I think is worth mentioning is, of course, it's the title of this talk, and Don just said it, usability. And what I would encourage store owners to do is get out there and browse around on as many sites as possible, and you'll quickly start to see things that you like, things that are natural to you as a browser. Try to take off your store owner hat and think about being a customer as you move the mouse around and do what you think would be natural for a customer, and you'll start to see the types of things that you would like, and those are the kinds. The more research that you can do, and the more things that you can do to figure out what other people are doing that you might like, that'll give you and inspire you for ideas, so that when you are looking at a redesign or you are contemplating different things, that you'll have some ideas, and you'll get the best design possible out of whomever you use for a redesign.
Right, exactly. Well said. So Mike, this next part, a lot of people think that when we're talking about top nav that we're wanting to eliminate the left navigation, and that's not the case. Now, on some sites where you've got a very limited product selection, if you've got less than 50 items, and I was reviewing a site the other day where the left nav, we'll probably eliminate that and just have the thumbnails stretch across left or right. But here, what you're seeing is the left nav is reintroduced. So we eliminated it on the home page, but once they've navigated into jerky, as you can see here, compared to the old site on the left back there, you're only showing jerky-related categories, right? So if somebody says, I want to look at jerky, the only thing you're showing them is jerky-related products. You're not showing them smoked meats or gourmet gifts or deli stuff. That's for their section-specific navigation. JT, anything to add to that? Pretty self-explanatory. What do you think?
No, I would agree. Yeah.
Okay.
If I'm interested in jerky, that's the only thing that I want to see.
Right. Another thing, too.
JT, what number of links would you say on the left-hand side? Like jerky, this number, you've got 8 links there. Is that pretty much the top end, the number of links you'd want to see on the left-hand side?
No, I think for interior left nav, especially the section specific. I mean, obviously I wouldn't show 100, but I mean, I would even go up to say 20 or 30. I mean, to me, this is the level where it's all right to have a lot more links because it's specific to that section that you're on.
That's well said. And I had this discussion the other day with a merchant that was debating about the fold. The fold is where you have to start scrolling to see more of the elements on the site design. And I do believe that people will scroll, but I think that you've got to at least establish above the scroll what people can expect below the scroll. I think, you know, the old adage was that if anything below the scroll was death. I don't think that's really the case now, especially with mobile, that people will scroll. But I think you have to establish something that inspires them to scroll versus just having surprises below the scroll. And real quick, let's go to the next one here. So for the product page, what this does, you see the left nav is again eliminated. And this is a very straightforward, very simple layout. It's just, there it is, teriyaki beef, jerky, not a whole lot of options. Here's the description. But the left nav, if this was included, would only serve to compound the detail when it really just needs to be streamlined. You know, a lot of the product pages that JT and I come across, they have very, very small product photos, and that's usually because they have a left and sometimes a right column that squeezes everything here, and this allows it to be bigger and allow that meat to look savory and delicious. So that's something to point out there. So before we get too in the weeds here, I want to talk about a navigation glossary here. So site frames here. Let's go through all these. Talk to us about these various terms here.
The site frame is just basically the header and the footer of the entire site. It's what they remain consistent throughout every single step. Sometimes not as much on the cart, but every other part of the site, it's consistent. It's where people go to for information. It's familiar. And then, so again, the header, it includes typically the logo, the different categories.
And TLC stands for top level categories.
Yeah.
We'll go to that in a second.
Yeah,
TLC
definitely.
part.
And the search, the first place your customers will go to if they're looking to find information, correct? And then the footer is where sometimes people put an address bar, utility links, the symbols that you mentioned,
right.
The Norton.
That's where you put Norton.
Like exactly. That's where you stick them at the bottom.
Right.
And then, like we mentioned, the top level categories. Those are in this Strings and Beyond example, like the strings by instrument, strings by brand. The big categories, the place once they're ready to start shopping that your customers first go to.
Right.
Utility links are things like My Account.
About us, contact us, shipping,
things like that.
But it's not product specific.
Yeah. In this case, Strings and Beyond has a lot of theirs under a little drop down under Help.
Yeah.
That's that My Account up there. And then browsing categories, things like new arrivals, bestsellers, clearance, things like that aren't necessarily.
They're not product specific.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Very good. All right. So let's talk about some do's and don'ts about navigation. Now that we've gotten these 6-point glossaries aside, let's go into some do's and don'ts. And well, not all, most of the sites that we're showing screen grabs of here have volunteered for review. One of these was Ferry Glen. So JT, what do they not need to do here?
All right, don't create redundant links in the top nav and the left nav. You know, especially me as a shopper, I get confused. So if I see, for example, well, this one's kind of cropped, you can't really see it, but let's just say, like the gift ideas, for example. Like if that is also in the left nav, me seeing that smaller in the left nav and then also in the top nav, I don't know if each one of those goes to the same page or not. You know, again, we were kind of talking about earlier, you know, Ferry Glen has a very long left nav on the page, and it pretty much runs the whole,
cropping it here,
right? Yeah. The whole height of the whole page. So it forced me to read through all of those. Maybe some of them are even unnecessary links that I don't need to look at. You know, kind of consolidating here to a top nav. But you know, anytime that you've got redundant navigation like that, it just creates more confusion for the browser.
Well, and let's be honest, a lot of times merchants that, you know, they've had this left nav or whatever for a long, long time, and so they'll want to add some things. I think even UI helped with this one here. We've done like the rotators and whatnot, but sometimes, you know, I've been forced to use some very drastic language, like I want to blow up your navigation, you know, just to kind of get people's, you know, perspective on this, that listen, sometimes you've got to start fresh, just like Mike did with Strings and Beyond. He basically blew up his nav and reconstituted it in the new responsive nav, but you know, he was forced to basically blow it up, and sometimes you got to do that. So let's go to the next one. Don't treat browsing categories the same way as top level categories. So this is actually a better example here. Good example here. So just, it's very subtle, right, JT? But what is Always For Me doing that you'd recommend?
So what I really like, you know, about Always For Me, as far as the browsing categories, they've got the bestsellers, new arrivals, and sales. Those are important, so they are in the top navigation bar, but as you can see, they're treated a little differently with a little lighter purple so that they stand out. They're not product specific like your swimwear cover-up.
They're still there. They're still prominent,
right?
But it's not being treated the same way. And one reason behind that is because the eye is saying, all right, there's 4 main things that I need to center on that are product specific versus 7. Right. And your eye is attracted to like-minded items, so you're specifically telling your subconscious eye that, listen, these things are different. They're still worth your attention, but they're different. So let's go on to the next one. Do consider placing browsing categories within top-level category menus. What does that mean, JT?
Okay, so for example, if we were to look at this full site, they didn't have enough room in their top navigation. So what we actually did was to pull, say, like the new arrivals, for example, in this one, we actually put that in each of the TLC drop-downs. So if I were to click on that new arrivals under the women's tab, it would take me to the women's new arrivals. Same thing, if we were to click on signs or gear, those also have the new arrivals link in each one of those, but it's specific to that section.
Right. Okay. And do indicate which TLC links that have flyouts, example with arrows. So same thing here, right? So you're implying that with women that you can see more women-related categories with that subtle drop-down arrow, right?
That's correct. And some of these examples we'll look at here soon, they don't have any arrows or anything, so it's just a lot of top nav categories, and it's not until you actually hover over those that you actually realize that they have to fly out. Well, that's just poor navigation.
Yeah, exactly. So, Don, let me take a quick break right here. What is your take on hover versus click to deploy? We'll talk about mega menus here in just a bit, but what is your take on hovering to showcase the expanding menus versus clicking to expand them out? What's your take? Is it vary, or is there a best practice there? What do you think?
Well, I think it depends a lot on how it's implemented as well. Obviously, on a responsive, you can't deal with that on a phone because obviously you have no hover. When you're looking at it on a desktop site, I don't have a problem with hover, but you've got to make sure if you do the hover that you do it in a good way so that it makes it still usable. There's a lot of them that will, as soon as you move out, they disappear and they'll have little breaks and so cause some usability issues there. It's nice having a hover because it's simple. You don't have to actually click on anything to see it, but you just have to make sure it's done well so that it doesn't, doesn't make it harder to navigate, because those are the things that drive me nuts. Is when I'll mouse over something, I'm moving my mouse and I just, bump a little bit wrong and the thing disappears or slides away or whatever. It does something I don't want.
Right.
That's my biggest issue with them, but they make it nice and usable from a standpoint, and the nice thing about it is it makes it visible. Even if you say didn't have your arrows on there, the hover, you get to see it right away. Otherwise, the click, I may not notice until I go to click on it, and then I'm not sure what's going to happen when I click. Is it going to open up a nav? Is it going to go somewhere? I'm not sure. So.
Yeah, I agree completely. JT, any thoughts on that? Agree, disagree? What do you think?
No, I agree.
Okay. All right, a few more slides for do's and don'ts, and then we're going to tee up Tara for her segment here, talking about the hamburger, right? So do's and don'ts. Don't have 2 rows of stacked top navigation. This is a site we're working on here. OTC Wholesale is the current site design here, and as you can see with this blue bar here, medicines, personal care, bath and beauty, da-da-da, and they've got the second row here as well. And again, the merchant's trying to figure out, look, all these things are important. How can I fit them? And so their option was, well, let's just create 2 rows here. JT, what's wrong with that?
Whew, hard to read on the eyes, especially that much, or that low a contrast, rather, that thin a text on those the colored blue bars just makes it very difficult. There's a lot going on. There's creating a lot of kind of visual tension up there. I'm not sure if they do it or not, but for example, I've seen this on other sites where they've got 2 rows of stacked navigation like that, but each one of those actually has a flyout. And again,
that's a good point, especially with double flyouts,
right? Double flyouts. So as you're hovering over one of those, then it's overlapping the categories below it.
Right. Okay. Very good. Let's go on to, yes, it's organic. Don't place utility links next to or in place of TLC. So here, if you look below the grass line here and you see the sale, shop brand, adult,
the why organic.
Yeah, and then why organic. I mean, all of these are important. And one of the comments I typically make to merchants is, listen, all of this is good stuff, and I don't want to necessarily remove it from the site, but maybe we don't execute it the same way. Maybe we place it in a different area. Because your eye is trying to think, all right, what can I expect here? What can I shop? And it's seeing a combination of informational as well as product-related links. it messes up the flow, JT. Am I saying that right? How would you phrase that?
No, I'm going to say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, even going on the same top nav, we're talking about removing some of those unrelated, the product-specific ones out. But, I mean, even like the shop, notice there's like the shop brand adult, shop brand child baby, and then over there on the far right, we've got the shop fabric. I mean, I would even group similar elements together. So the ones that start with the shop, I would get those closer together. Again, it's just kind of the visual flow.
Right. Well said. Okay. So one more do's and don'ts slide. Don't have crossover subcategory links in multiple top-level categories. And we don't actually have a slide for this one, but what we typically see is when you've got the subcategories in flyouts, the real estate is so precious and so specific to that if you take these subcategories and put it in various top-level categories there, then it can mess the flow up. What do you think, JT?
Right. And also kind of a similar example, sometimes like we'll see where a client will have like a shop all products as one of the main ones, but then some of those same categories are also pulled out in the top nav.
Right.
And to me, kind of going back to the redundant top navigation we're talking about.
I think the big takeaway is you've got to have a plan. Look at these categories as like chapter headings, and you want to tell a different story in these chapters than you do in another chapter.
Right.
Okay. All right. So what you're seeing here is do use the footer. Now, a lot of people overlook the footer, and they'll just put a few, just random links here. But people, listen, a well-designed footer will get some clicks. It will get eyes on it. This is one from our client, Toy Wiz. Is that right?
Yes.
Toy Wiz. And so as you see here, he's got columns for the about, my account, order help, the toys policies. All this stuff is very important, but it's not. It's here in the footer. It's not taking away from the product-related links that you would find in the header. Also has the social media links, the trust symbols, and you can also put some things in the header that you could also put in the footer. Like you might put here another instance if you're toll-free. A lot of people think redundancy is terrible. Redundancy can actually be very good from a usability perspective, provided it's done in the right way. You just want to be very judicious about what you are redundant about. JT?
Right. And, over the past couple of years, too, I mean, you see, like Eric said, a lot more people using the footer almost kind of as a mini help center, a mini resource center, to where, I mean, we look at sites back when I first started, say 8 years ago, where it was basically just
an afterthought, right?
Yeah, it was just an afterthought. It was just kind of to cap off the bottom of the page. You had like the copyright and maybe a couple credit card icons, and that was it. Whereas now, like Eric said, repeating a lot of the same kind of links down there. But I think the thing, the biggest takeaway here is to have it structured. You still don't want it to be like a catch-all, to where, say, if it didn't fit in the header, don't just throw it in the footer. To me, you still have to have that structure down there, especially with the way things are going with responsive, and thinking how this is going to rearrange on mobile. Still lay it out in a way to where, even though you've got a lot of content down there, it's still structured and still easy to read.
Right, exactly. So, Tara, the hamburger. We've teed it up here, and it's here, the hamburger. Now, Don, you were actually thinking it looks more like an Egg McMuffin. Is that right? With the
Yeah, I've had some people comment that, yeah, it's more like an Egg McMuffin since they're all even, because some of these burgers nowadays, it's either really big or really small in the middle. But
yeah, well, I tried to find a hamburger graphic here where they were relatively even. I spent a good part of my day.
It's like a juicy, photo of a hamburger, It's like, that's not appetizing.
I haven't had lunch there.
Right, okay. So, but we've also talked about, responsive specific navigation. And this is one of the key tenets of current responsive navigation. And a lot of people, there's kind of a debate about this in the user experience community. Some people hate the hamburger. They want to see it die. And some feel like it's an established part of usability. So a lot of debate raging right now about the hamburger. But Tara, tell us what it's all about.
All right, I'll give you guys, first we have a poll.
Hopefully you know what the hamburger icon is. You see it on responsive sites. When did you first come across these 3 lines for the hamburger? Where did you first notice this? Up there. We're voting. Lots of votes coming through here. All right, let's close the poll and see our results here. So about 58, was it 58%?
Yeah, 58%.
Was on the website. Don, what are your thoughts on those results there? About what you figured?
Yeah, it's pretty much what I figured. You know, it's one of those things. It's becoming more commonplace, but still, there's a lot. I mean, you'll talk about it, but there's a lot to be done or not done with it, frankly.
Right.
But yeah, it's about what I expect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Tara, take us through it here.
All right. All right, the hamburger icon was first actually invented in the 80s by Norm Cox, who worked for Xerox. Xerox came out with a product called Xerox Star that was the first graphical user interface that we've seen. Norm said that he designed it to mimic the look of a menu list, but then after Xerox Star, we kind of saw it disappear for a couple of decades.
It went off the grid for a while.
It did.
Yeah.
And then it was first resurrected as a voice memo for iPad. And here we see a screenshot of it being used in the first Twitter app, which was Tweety for iPad. And also, I think where a lot of people first started seeing it, at least where I first started seeing it, I guess apparently only 12%.
Facebook, yeah.
It was Facebook.
Right.
It started out as kind of the little square icon, and then Facebook slowly migrated to use it as in the middle picture, you see it used as a dash, or as the dash is the normal, and then I've seen that used a couple times where people pair it next to another image.
Right.
In this case, it's your profile drop-down on the right of the middle Facebook one.
It's not just the 3 lines.
Correct.
Or something.
So Facebook really was pivotal in streamlining how the hamburger was going to be used. And then you see on the right an example of it, how it functions. The hamburger's really become an industry standard. You see it more and more on not just used in apps, but used on mobile websites. And I've even seen some examples where people are using it on their desktop website as well.
I've seen that too. It's not just specific to mobile or tablet.
Exactly.
You actually see it in conjunction with the desktop.
It's truly become a recognizable image as meaning menu.
Well, and as we go to the next slide here, one of the things that as we talk about usability, one of the biggest tenets of usability is to bank on what people are used to. You're trying to get people not to think. And so if the more that this is a commonly accepted icon, you want to not challenge that. You want people to feel comfortable and not have to make them figure out, all right, where do I go to look at the navigation, for example. So this sample here on the left, it's a site that was submitted for today's webinar called Magazine Line. You can see what they're doing here. And they're doing something a little bit different than what we commonly put on some of our responsive sites. If you see there on the far right, to the right of the search, they've got the hamburger and it expands out. It's kind of an accordion menu for the way they're doing their categories, whereas a lot of times when we do the menu, it flies out from the left. And so we're seeing that. Another thing here on the Ranger Up example is we started doing this a lot. I see with the Yahoo app. I don't know if they copied us or somebody else, but we're doing a lot of the. I'm kidding with that. Don't send hate mail. With the menu spelled out underneath the 3 lines. Because some people, even though it is a commonly accepted icon right now, they still don't know what that means. We can look at a site here if we've got time about how they're using it very subtly. And you've got to be very specific about, hey, this is the menu button. You want to click on this to expand it out here. JT, what are your thoughts on what you're seeing there?
Yeah, I think, a big thing too is I think it depends on your target audience. If you're appealing to, a lot of the millennials that are used to being on their smartphones, Facebook obviously that uses the icon, they're going to be familiar with that. So I think you can get away with a little bit more. But I think, just in terms of best practices, I like it when the word menu is actually kind of incorporated into the menu icon because it's clear, so you don't have to think about it. It says what it is. Again, aside from the word menu, we've seen it to where, it says nav instead. But I think, an important thing too is anytime that we put one of those is make sure that it stands out in the header. Sometimes it's too commonly, it looks like it blends in with the logo or it matches all the other icons in the header. And to me, that's a little poor usability because it kind of blends in, just like that Ranger Up example, where it's the bold yellow. We hadn't used that anywhere else on the site, so it just really stands out.
It pops. Right. Well, let's talk about mega menus here. And like Don said, a lot of when we're talking about mousing over versus clicking, mega menus are specific to desktop use. They're not for tablet or mobile, because as we all know, there is no such thing as mouse over for tablet and mobile, like Don said. But mega menus, especially for desktop, can be a great way to create visual interest in subcategories. But let's talk about some do's and don'ts there. Like I said, they're all for desktop usage. Yeah, keep going. I'm sorry. All right. So the first thing is throw every single subcategory in there. Don't do that. So this is an example of a site that's doing this right now. They've, you know, as you mouse around their various categories, it varies. You know, sometimes they have 8 to 10 categories, and they've got, you know, dozens like this. They also have, we'll talk about this here in a second, but this example has just a picture there. It's not clickable to anything, and it's just kind of there. It's just kind of eating up space, and there's a lot of unused space underneath that. Don't make all your subcategory links all caps if you can avoid that, especially if you've got a long list. You want to be very careful about making sure that is a very legible list, and doing small all caps like that can be a killer. All right. Don't include non-clickable or obscure imagery. All right. So we looked at the example previous where they just had a product like that. You can't click to anything, so it's kind of a bait and switch. Very bad for usability. That can hurt you. All right. And make sure you have that you don't have a huge spatial variation between menus. So here in this this site example, you can see that one is very, very long, one's very small. You've got to have kind of an average between that. Now, if you remember back on Mike's for Strings and Beyond, his mega menus were all very different. It wasn't like it was one formula that stretched across the site, because the content was very different with each. It was the same basic dimensions, right, JT, for that, but the way that we handle the layout was very different. And so if you're going to be different, make sure that the layout changes accordingly.
And I think, you know, one thing going on this example we're looking at, I think you can always look at doing columns as well. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing is like Eric was talking about, the vertical jump from one. You know, as I'm hovering over each of those top-level categories, one has 10, one has 4, and another one has like 20. You know, my eyes just jumping around the page. So, you know, if you've got 20 or 30 or something like that, look at breaking that up into multiple columns so that as I'm scrolling across each of those top-level categories, the flyout, you know, is all pretty consistent as far as the height.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. One other thing, Eric, real quick on that, just a quick note also, is if they've got a lot and they don't figure out a good way that they can't break its columns easy or something like this, they could have it coded so that it will show the top, you know, first number of sections, and they have like a link at the bottom that says, you know, more sections or something like that to help shorten that up a bit. So.
Exactly. So you can click right to that main category. That's exactly right. So the first one in the foreground here is from Amazon. You can see how they're have their what to wear this spring guy, and he's kind of breaking the border, kind of a cool effect that we've done on some stores as well. And the one behind it is actually from Home Depot. But what you're seeing with both of these is they're grouping, especially with Home Depot. So they've got lumber and composites there, and like even with that little orange arrow, it's very subtle, but it's very clear that if you click on lumber and composites, that takes you to the overall landing page. Whereas if you want to go specifically to the subcategories landing page, you can do that as well, but it's grouped underneath lumber and composites. You know, one of the questions we got was, you know, how do we work with navigation where it's, you've got a ton of various categories? Well, Home Depot is a great example for you. Amazon is as well. Of course, theirs with Amazon, they don't really have a top nav. You know, they've got so many departments that all of their navigation is hid under the shop by department. So when you mouse over shop by department, you see all of these subcategories, and when by mousing over that, you see the mega menus fly out from there. It's a little bit different with Amazon, but I don't know if it's a true apples-to-apples comparison, at least for a lot of the people listening to the webinar, because you're not a generalist superstore like Amazon. At least I hope you're not. You've got, you know, typically niche stores that need to behave a little bit differently in terms of navigation. So let's go on to the next one. Do limit the number of subcategories there. We talked about consolidation earlier, and like Don just said, include a shop all link or see all is it in this example if they don't all fit. So in this example, this is a site that we did with cleaning and detailing as you mouse over, even from a consolidation for the top level categories. They really have 3 top level categories, and they have gift guide and bestsellers treated in blue. Like JT said earlier, you want to treat those a little bit differently. But when you mouse over cleaning and detailing, notice how even for, you know, ordinary household products like this, you put a little bit of a visual flourish for people to recognize hand duster versus just a link that doesn't have any kind of visual attached to it. And that's only possible if they were able to consolidate. If you had 25, 30 categories, it'd be a lot tougher to pull off. Okay, let's go on the next. Okay, yeah, feature bestsellers in larger displays. The example here is microfiber mops. They sell a ton of these things, and so that gives them real estate dedicated to a bestseller to kind of change up the layout. Okay. Do make sure there are clear ways, and this is Mike's example here, there are clear ways to browse general categories in addition to specific subcategories. JT, you want to unpack that a little bit there?
Yeah, for example, in this one, the material and the style, or the pick style, both of those have different subcategories, so we wanted to call those out a little bit differently, almost treated in more of an ad-like fashion at the top, to where each of those little yellow links are clickable directly to that section. A little bit different way to lay it out as opposed to just doing a column title with all the subcategory links under it. But aside from just the subcategories, we're also featuring some of Mike's most popular brands that he sells. Those the 5 logos going across, as well as we've got a couple other sections down there at the bottom for the bulk picks, signature picks, and the jazz picks.
Right. And I want to interject something here real quick, and you can leave that up, Tara, but I want to interject that just because we're talking about mega menus and all this, this does not mean that we recommend this for every store owner. I mean, it's right for Mike, maybe not right for your store. And there's no one way to do mega menus, is there, JT? I mean, it's got to be specific to your brand, to your industry, to your products. And so the cool thing about mega menus, you can get creative with it. You can get creative about how the visuals are displayed to solve specific navigation problems. So I think they're a good tool, not necessarily the tool to put on every store, but certainly, we do them a good bit with some of the stores we create.
Right. I agree.
Make sure the text is very legible and not too tightly spaced. Space is a big component of usability. Make sure you've got specific real estate laid out there. Okay? So we've got another poll, Tara.
All right. How do you feel about your current category system?
Yeah, we're talking a lot about consolidation. So do you feel like you've consolidated enough? Do you feel like your usability is exactly where it needs to be? Or there's some changes that you need to make? So how do you feel about your store in regards to a lot of what we're discussing here? All right, let's show the results there. All right, so 44% say they're pretty satisfied with it. Okay. So Don, what's your take on what you're seeing there with the polls? Probably kind of even heat there as far as too full and bloated, and the last one, sure.
When I look at that, I also see that really it's like 56% aren't happy with it. Even though it looks like the majority are happy, they're really not. It's most are not happy. It's just two different categories for it. They have an idea what to do, or they don't have an idea what to do. But either way, they aren't happy with it, and it's tough. It's tough when you look at your products, trying to figure out the best ways to categorize. And there's different ways. You can categorize by product, you can categorize by the type of shopper, and they can all make sense. So every store is a little different.
Right. So what I want to do here, and this is a 90-minute webinar, we're at the hour mark, just about here, and what we want to do for the rest of the webinar is we're going to look at some reviews, and then Don is going to be talking about navigation. So hopefully you'll be able to stick around for all of that. But first up, we have magazine line, and we're going to be focusing our comments specifically to the navigation here, the overall usability for that. We're not going to go too much into the layouts. We may have a few bits and pieces here, but for time's sake, we're going to be focusing primarily on the navigation and filtering. But Don, what are your thoughts on magazine line?
Eric.
Yes.
Hey, before I just wanted to add something real quick there,
sure,
if
Mike.
possible. That poll.
Sure.
The 44% that said they were satisfied and streamlined, I mean, unless they've just finished 8 years of testing and optimizing their website, I would challenge everybody, even if you feel that way, to consider that there's always room for improvement and testing and refining. Browsers change. People change. The way people browse change. So I would urge you not to be complacent with your website. You used our website as an example, and I told you this before the call, but I feel like we're only 60% there. We have so much more work to do to work through this. So And so I just urge the 44% to think about that and look at their website in a way in order to drive that profit number. The next thing I want to say, and JT can mention this, I wrote down a note here about responsive design. When we went through this redesign process, I didn't quite realize what it takes for you guys to be able to design the full site and then keep in mind the responsive stuff as well. And I think it is important that people who are considering a design, considering a responsive design, that they understand the implications and they kind of realize, and you kind of have to think about things in a different way. It's almost like you guys are redesigning websites in a whole new way now. And JT, maybe you understand what I'm getting at. Maybe you can share just a few words to the people on the call about what it takes to, or just some easy differences between what it takes to do a redesign as opposed to a traditional desktop design like we did 5 years ago.
Sure, Mike. Like you said, I mean, it's something that's been challenging us, for years, and especially the more that we do. I mean, it is a challenge, and it's something that we really got to think. It's not just this desktop design anymore. It's like we got to think about it. How is it going to work on mobile? How is it going to work on tablet? How is it going to work on desktop? And it's almost designing, like you said, like 3 sites in one. And a lot of the more recent responsive sites we've done, we've kind of started doing more of the kind of the mobile first approach where where we start, we get you guys kind of categories and we start looking at, all right, how is this going to work on mobile? And then to kind of start working upwards or backwards rather, let's say from there. But like you said, it's stuff that used to work just on desktop where you've got a ton of links. That's not going to work well, for responsive, especially mobile.
Well, and Mike, I think you brought up a good point about the 44%. We're not making any judgments on anybody. We don't know exactly what they're thinking. But I can tell you from talking to a lot of merchants, when we're talking about making changes to the navigation, sometimes some common pushbacks that we receive is, well, listen, one of the biggest compliments that I get about the site is people write in or call and say how easy it is for my store to shop. And that's great. Listen, I'm glad to hear that feedback. But if you are seeing some glaring, challenges there with the usability, one of the things that I push back on is, listen, I'm not focused so much about the people that are writing in telling you how much they love the site. I'm focusing on the people that are not writing in and not buying with you because they don't like the site. It's hard to shop. There's some specific things holding them back. The other thing that I hear a good bit is from merchants, and it's not everybody, but I do hear this quite often, is, listen, I want to make the site navigable based on how I shop. I want the store to be based around what I like in terms of navigation. So they kind of use themselves as a litmus test for navigation. And I think to a certain degree that makes sense because it is your store. But on the other hand, we're not designing for you. We're designing for your customer. And it all comes down to the stats. Are they buying with you or not? You can love the site and feel very passionate about some things that are up there. But at the end of the day, it's about how the site is performing. Don, what's your thought? Or Mike, any comments there?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's very key to get other people looking at the site other than you. Get some friends, get some people that will be honest with you, honestly, and have them try to find things in your site. And also think about the different types of shoppers. I mean, I mentioned it briefly before, but there are some sites it makes sense to categorize by product type. But there's some where it's going to make sense, like you sell bike stuff. You may want to have sections that are developed and designed for the bike enthusiast versus the casual rider versus something else. So you just have to always sort of be flexible and think it through.
Yeah, and we actually got a good question here. Tara, read that out there.
Yeah.
Good question.
Someone pointed out that anytime you consolidate menus and things like that, that there's an SEO component that has to be considered.
Right.
Really, anytime you change anything about your site like that.
Yeah, listen, I mean, it's not, I think I'm really glad whoever asked that put that forth today, because anytime you're looking at making changes to your navigation, it's not just, hey, no big deal, I'm just changing around my navigation. It's invasive brain surgery. It is something that you really have to take seriously, especially from an SEO standpoint, because we're talking about how Google reads your site. I always tell people, listen, if you're working with an SEO company, get them to look this over. Make sure that they buy in with these changes and you're not making the changes nilly-willy. Certainly with the navigation, you want to make sure that all of your page IDs, the way the URL is structured, the on-page content, all of that remains the same on changes that you're making there. But yeah, I agree. You can't make these changes in a vacuum. You've got to really make sure that you're taking into account SEO. Don, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, hopefully, if you're removing sections, then obviously you've got to do some redirects there. But otherwise, yeah, making sure you keep your page IDs there, and you may reorganize how you get to them. But the key thing is you make a more usable site, your customers are going to be happy. And honestly, Google and search engines are trying to do better at finding sites that are usable and people like more than just strictly a bunch of links and a bunch of text. So.
No, well said. So let's thank you again for that question. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to ask. But let's go through some of these sites. Again, we're going to kind of zip through this and just talk about the navigation. First up is Magazine Line. And I like the way that they've categorized everything. They've got their men, for women, for teens, for kids, all titles. So I'm a big fan of odd numbers. Here you've got 5 categories here, and I think that's a good, manageable list. It's not overwhelming. It's got proper spacing. Not the biggest fan of this categories thing, though. You've got very specific nav, and then you've got, I'm trying to work with that. Let's see. I did expand, right? Categories. Okay. Yeah, there it is. And then you've got women's magazines, men. So to me, that's a little redundant, because you've got men's and women's right next to it, same with like kids and all. But then you go into the rest with like sports and whatnot. So, JT, if you were this company, how would you do this? I mean, do you see this as redundant? Do you see it as helpful? Like, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I feel like it's still a little redundant. I mean, you're going to have some categories like if you scroll back over, it's like the entertainment, sports. Instead of doing categories, I might do it by genre or something like that.
I like that. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Doing some other type of drop down like that, so you're not repeating any of the same navigation. Because obviously the ones that are left in the shop by category now, those are not going to fit in the current top nav, just with the amount of space that's left. But I would break it up that way.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I think that when you've got the genres there, that can really I like that.
Interest.
Yeah, categories is so general, but I think it's kind of working against them. But like I said, I do like the way that they've gotten very judicious about the categories that they do have. Don, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I like they got the main ones obviously at the top there. For some reason, the little arrows to the right bother me, but that's
me too.
I feel like they're connected somehow, and they're really not. But
good point.
But I like that. When you go into a major section, they do actually offer filtering. We'll try to show that briefly when I go over filtering some. And so I do like a lot of things on here. It's pretty streamlined to a large extent, but maybe some little reorganization could help to get that long list.
Anything else about this site that you want to point out before we move on?
I would just say, Eric. Oh, sorry, John. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, yeah. To me, the little arrows at the top kind of feel like it's almost a breadcrumb business. So I would maybe either drop those, space those, all of those categories out in that title. I'm not a big fan of the different font face between the category links, the browse magazines on the left, and then those. I mean, I would almost, maybe all of your all the category links could have a similar typeface. We've got the sans serif up there for men, for women, for teens. Of course, this is just my opinion, and these are just. I almost want those to be a little bit bold. The for men, for women, even on the front page, I felt like those important category titles were blending in with the rest of the site. The last thing I'll say is those links at the top, my account, those types of things, I would try to find a way to work those into some of that white space so you get 16 pixels of height back on your site.
Right. Real quick, we need to move on here, but I promised myself not to talk about the layouts here. We really want to do a Usability U based on layout. But while we're on this page, I'm not a big fan of these kind of generic thumbnails here. I mean, this is, in a sense, navigation here, but you're not selling this dog. I mean, you're selling like pet magazines here. And I get the idea that you're trying to put this ubiquitous image to, make sense for this, but it's like, you've got these 2 feet between the other feet, and it's like, get it, sex. These are sexy type adult magazines here. But, put Playboy, put whatever it is there. I mean, he's got, Playboy listed, within men. I mean, if you click on that, you see it pretty prominently, down below. And so, I just think that it's not on this page, but it is within. Well, I clicked on women. Sorry, I guess Playboy would not. There it is. So you've got, first thumbnail right there. I mean, that at least works better than I think a generic thumbnail. What do you think, JT?
I'd agree. Real quick on the same page, the thing that kind of threw me earlier when I was looking at the site. All right, so we obviously clicked on 4 men at the top, but down here at the bottom, the left, and the recipient, I don't get the man, teen, women. Like, why is there 28 magazines in the men's section for women?
Yeah.
I don't understand that. It's the same way on the women.
What's your take on the filter, Don?
The filtering has got some good things to it. I'm not really fond of the little scroll and the recommended for there. Some of it, how it works on the desktop, I actually like. There's a couple things that are good. On the mobile, because this is responsive, I don't care for some of the filtering shown at the bottom. When you pick certain ones, it shows the top what you selected, but on the mobile, it shows way down at the bottom. But overall, it's not bad, honestly.
Let's jump on to a few other sites. I want to leave room for your part for navigation and filtering, Don. Just not wanting to click. Oh, there we go. So for Baby Beat here, you've got, this is a perfect site that I think maybe does not need a left nav because they don't have a ton of products. I wanted to kind of mention this specifically. They've only got a select number of these fetal Dopplers. So it's, shop fetal Dopplers, has all these, and then shop by category with, fetal Dopplers here. So I think, to me, this site could benefit very well from a very consolidated, 3, no more than 5 major, I'm thinking like 3 categories of JT, because they don't sell a ton,
One thing I did notice, the pregnancy wheel and planner and the infant scale, those click, I think, directly to the product. Which we always kind of advise against that, specifically when you're mixing it with subcategories here. So you've got to that's a good catch, JT. It's clicking right to the item. But I think that, to me, this could benefit from just ditching the left nav completely. Just don't keep it at all. I mean, I don't think you even need a filter for a site like this. Don, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's simple enough. I mean, some good reorganization. I mean, it doesn't have that many, and I think you can easily do it. You don't need filtering or anything like that because it's all pretty straightforward.
Right. So let's talk about. We talked about Fairy Glen earlier, and I want to talk about the Christmas in Prescott real quick. So this is a responsive site, but there's a lot of things. I mean, look how much real estate that they're dedicating for this, gingerbread man and, the Santa pushing the sleigh here and, that kind of stuff. And they have a tremendous amount of real estate they're dedicating for just, content right there. And then they've got their shop by brand, shop by theme running as a very long left nav. JT, Don, or Mike, any thoughts on this site? Brands, themes, new, and sales. So they've got this category thing, but doesn't really feel part of the overall site frame.
Right.
Yeah, I barely even see that.
Yeah, I think this site would be very easy to consolidate to a top nav because, I mean, they're pretty much already doing that anyway with the brands, themes. They've got at the top. I agree it is kind of hidden now, but I think removing the left nav and then pulling that bar up actually more into the header and not kind of tucked into the page. And then doing like a mega menu flyout for each of those. That way you can see all those subcategories because some of the subcategories are fairly long too.
Well, and think about what she sells. This is, to me, a great candidate for a mega menu because her stuff is so visual.
Right.
I think that'd be really cool. Well, Tara, let's go. I wanted to get some of these other sites. I'm sorry I won't have time today, but I want to make sure we've got enough time to go through Don's presentation for filtering and see if there was any questions from that standpoint. So let's cue this up for you. What are your thoughts overall on filtering?
Filtering, honestly, there's a lot when people hear about filtering, and I'm going to try to move through this pretty quick. A lot of people see it but don't always know what it is. Sometimes they're called layered navigation. Basically, it's obviously where you can go to a site, and we've got a screenshot here where you see a lot of products, and then you can filter that down to what you need. And honestly, for large sites with a lot of products, especially with a lot of similar products, I think it makes a great addition to help people really find what they want. If we go on to the next slide, you can show we've got basically over time, there's a lot of different looks and layouts. We saw one there. There's two different ones here of different ways to do filtering on a site. Both on the desktop and on mobile, it changes, and a large part depends on your products, depends on your customers. You've got things like Lucy down at the bottom here that all they've got is color and size. And when you have something simple like that, it makes a nice way to do this on the desktop, and I believe at some point we show the mobile does basically the same thing to make it very easy to use. You've got the one at the top right that's got different brands, price range, fit style, ear cup type, all these things you can filter on. And so I think what you have to do is you have to look at your products and then try to figure out what's going to work. And as I said, it's constantly a changing landscape, I guess, in usability. We're all trying to figure out what really works. And so if you look at just about any site, they almost always differ from the next site on what's there. And so I think over time we're learning what does work. So if you go on to the next site here, we got a poll first.
Yeah, we got a quick little poll. Pull it up. Have you ever thought about adding filtering to your e-commerce store? Now, obviously, it doesn't apply to everyone. Some people already use filtering and they're satisfied with it. Some people use filtering, but they quite haven't streamlined the process yet. And then there's a couple people who want to add filtering, whether it makes sense for them to do on desktop or mobile or both. And this is a multi-check if you want to check more than one as you're doing your answers.
Okay, let's see what we got here.
People say. Oh, fair amount already use filtering. That's actually good. I mean, depending on the store, but very interesting to see. Very interesting to see. But certainly, it's one of those things that I think everyone has to think about, especially if they have a fair number of products, which boils down to. And I think on our next slide at the beginning, and I don't know if you're able to go to the live site for this or not. If you got the link on there, we can kind of go there real quick. This is not even really filtering, but I wanted to show something just from a usability perspective. This is a site that sells lighting kits for your car, and they've got the shop by vehicle, which we're looking at. And if we click on cars, trucks, and vans, you go, okay, well I can oh, great, I can help me find it, and it comes up with this list. And honestly, when I look at it, I go, oh, it's all the years. Try to find a number on there real quick, and it's actually more challenging than you think. Because I think what happened is they came with this idea, and it's a great idea, but the programmer went, oh, it's just easy. I'll just put the numbers, from left to right and have it descend. But when you look at this and you see them in columns, your eye doesn't work that way. At least mine doesn't, and everyone I've asked doesn't. You generally think of it as like a newspaper column. You expect the numbers to go down the left column, then the next column. And that's not the way it works. So when I look at it and I have to find 1993 in the middle, I have to do a lot of looking. And then when you go through and you actually get to it, now you get to your model of your car. And I don't know about everyone there, and everyone has different opinions on this. I personally like to see it the reverse. I like to pick up my car first and work my way down, because now I've got too many choices here. And as you've had to make too many choices at the year. If my car wasn't available in 1966, why did I look at it? So we can go back to the slides now, but I just wanted to show what I think is a great concept, but I think usability-wise, the programmer sort of controlled how it was laid out, and they didn't really think about how the person was actually going to use it when they're browsing. This is obviously Macy's here that we're looking at. I think just as we've talked about with actual navigation, when you think about filtering, you've got to plan your navigation and your taxonomy, your organization of your products before you get down there. Macy's does something different, and actually we sort of talked about this earlier. They've got the shop by size on the top, but they've also got it in the filtering on the side. They use theirs not only to navigate between products, but also sections in those products. That can be good or bad. I find it tends to be a little confusing, especially when it's in both places. I think it was JT mentioned that when you see it both places, you aren't sure if that does the same thing. So that's one thing I would say people really make sure to do is don't just use filtering as, oh, I have a whole lot of products, I'll just filter it. No, you still want to plan how they're grouped and how they're organized first. If we go on to the next slide here real quick, I'm trying to move fast here because we got like 12 minutes left. This is showing off of an actual mobile site. And once again, what you allow people to filter by matters. This one's got a button that you click on your screen to pull up your filter options, and it has a drop-down, and the drop-down actually extends down beyond the screen. On a phone, that's not too bad because you can scroll and people are very used to it. But what I would say is make sure the important features that people are going to filter by the most list up at top, because you make them do a little less work. On desktop, it does a similar type of thing, and so you just want to make them do less work. Okay, if we go on to the next slide here. Am I moving fast enough, Eric? Am I talking fast enough?
You're doing great.
Yeah, you're good.
We actually saw this site already. This is Magazine Line, and so I don't have a lot to show on this. You can go to the site and you can see how the filtering works. And I think in a lot of ways they do a lot of things right with this. If I go and if I select a price, once this thing loads up here, you'll see the selection show up at the top of the screen. So if you check one of those boxes, just check any one of the prices or recommendeds or whatever, and it updates. And at the top, you can see your viewing and your viewing by price and up to $10. And I actually like that. And it actually does. We can't see it here on the mobile right now. I won't make it go that far. It does do it on mobile. It does it at the bottom, and I actually wish it did at the top, maybe in a little more compact format. But I think it does a good job. So if we go back to the slides now, so that's showing a left filtering, which you've got other sites that use it. Actually, Nixon, I think we'll skip for right now. We won't go to the live site on that. But the left filter, you've got, the fit. You've got the top filter. We've shown Lucy's before, and you can see their mobile and their desktop here. It really depends on your products and how many choices you've got. Once you get to mobile, you've got to pretty much go to the top in one way, shape, or form. So once again, if you've organized and planned things out, it helps. Going on into displaying status for the users, make sure the new thing, and it's, I don't know if it's new, but the more common thing now to try and help, which Magazine Line did at the top, is showing what those active filters are above the filtering area or somewhere that's easy to see. Especially when you get to a mobile, it's nice to quickly see what am I limiting this to already. If you have to scroll down and see it all, on a desktop it's not as bad, but it just adds a little bit of extra usability. Okay, I'm moving. What are we down to, 9 minutes? And I'd like to get questions at the end too. But
Yeah, we're doing good.
Responsive. Hopefully people can keep up. This is one. Okay, let's go to this site for Macy's. I hate to pick on Macy's, but this personally just bothered me. This is going to show the mobile side of Macy's in the browser, so the widths are different than you would see on your phone. You just click away, so that little goes away. This filtering bothers me. They've got a nice button here for filter by, and that's not abnormal to use. When you click on filter by, it pulls out a menu that will slide out. Okay, I'm filtering by. Okay, let's filter by something. Let's pick size range or whatever, and click on that. Okay, there's another slide out. Okay, now I click on a size. Okay, so you click on a size. Now, what's important to notice is you can't hit back. You have to hit the done button at the top to now apply this.
Yeah.
But then you're not done because I click done. Now you must click. Now you must click apply to apply it.
Wow.
Now there may be some other combination I missed to make this work, but it's just a lot of steps to do that. Plus, then once again, now at the top here, I see nothing to tell me what I have now filtered by. We just talked about having a status on there, and so I don't want to pick on them, but I found it fairly annoying. I actually, first time I went to try and use it, clicked in, but then didn't know I had to hit done and apply, so I hit the back arrow, and then nothing filtered. So we can go back to the slides, but I just wanted to show people, really how that worked. The slides, frankly, didn't do it justice on how much of a pain that could be. So you really want to think a lot about usability, especially when you get to the mobile phone. We mentioned before the whole above the fold thing. The nice thing on mobile is people do scroll. As much as the filtering on the right extends beyond the screen, that's not as horrible on the phone as you think, because people actually very normally scroll. In fact, I've seen some stats that even say in your add to cart button on mobile, it's even sometimes okay if it's just below the fold or just below the bottom of the screen, because people scroll so much. They generally scroll to see more as a habit. So I just wanted to sort of mention that when you're looking at mobile, I understand you want to worry about space, but don't worry quite as much about scrolling as you used to, or at least as you do on a desktop site. Whew. Okay, we're moving. Once again, back to Lucy's again, because there's a simple and easy. When you've got filters, try to limit to what makes sense to the user. Simplify if you can. I mean, there are some sites we've done where they've got 10 different things you can filter by, and that may make sense for that store, but really try to think about your users, because the fewer choices you give them, honestly, in some ways makes it easier on them. Now, that requires, of course, getting your product sections down to some kind of maintainable level that these numbers make sense. But just where you can, simplify, because it can help simplify what you can make the site look like, especially when you get to a responsive site, and how you make that filtering usable on that responsive site. Okay, we got one more set of slides, and this is sort of the filtering don'ts. We actually sort of covered one of these with Macy's. We'll go to the live site real quick on Nixon, Nixon.com, because this is one thing that just sort of bothered me as I was using it. And they actually do this both on their mobile site and on their desktop site, so it's not specific to one or the other. But when you get to the filtering, if it loads here, if we go down to filter something, on the phone it may not be quite as bad, we'll see. If you click on filter and just scroll down a little bit, you've got to scroll down to actually see what you want to filter. Click on Essentials here under the style, and you'll see they do something different. They're actually sort of taking you to a different section page, but the most annoying part to me is this top banner now on Essentials is now showing back at the top. It's now scrolled me up past my products back to this banner. And on some of the filters, it'll scroll you back up to the top. You see this same little Essentials thing over and over again. Now it's filtered below, but I keep having to scroll down to try and see products. And on the desktop, it does the same thing. It has this big giant banner trying to push one particular product, and that's great. But it takes up so much of the page that when the filtering activates, I keep having to scroll down. I can't see those products. So just think about that. One thing that I hate saying it, but Amazon does well, is when they have you filter, whatever they've pushed at the top actually disappears. Or you can have the page simply, depending on how you do it, not reload and just change the product area, which personally what I like, because then it makes it not have to leave and move from where you're at. We've already looked at the Macy's one. If we go back to the slides, we'll skip forward actually to the O'Neill site. That was the Macy's. We've already sort of seen that. The O'Neill site, you can go ahead and click through, and we can see this. And theirs does the same thing. If we look at the mobile, I think their desktop probably does the same thing. And it boils down to this. If possible, when someone is picking a filter, as this comes up, we'll have to get to an actual section there somewhere. Maybe click on the menu and get to a section to filter. Let's go to any section here. I'm moving. We got 3 minutes. When you click on filter options, it's great. On your phone, it clicks, and yes, you can scroll on your phone a little easier than you can on the desktop. But if you click on a size, click on anything to filter, what immediately happens is it closes up the filter, refreshes the page, and then once again, if I want to filter by 2 things, I got to reopen that. On mobile, I don't have quite as much choice in some ways. Sometimes depending on how you've laid it out, you may have to have it do that. Desktop, it certainly is not needed in most cases. But if possible, leave that open until a user wants to close it. just because if they do want to filter by more than one item, it's going to depend a large part on your products. If you've only got 30 products and you're filtering, that's not quite as big of a deal because they don't need the filter quite as critically. But if I'm shopping for like TVs on Best Buy and I had to keep dropping that drop down for my 4 different things that I wanted to filter by, I would get so annoyed. So that's the key thing to look at is, what is your user, what is your products looking like? My main thing coming out of this is the same as Eric was talking about. Go through your site, make sure you've got it well categorized, and then when you get down to needing a filter, make sure it makes sense that you've got good products that all at least should be filtered together. Find what people can want to filter by, and then make sure it's usable on the phone, on the desktop. Have people that you don't know try it. Or can't do people you don't know, but have people that that don't know your site try it out on your site and give you their input, and watch them use it too, because some may say, oh, I really liked it, but then if you watch, they'll see they stumble as to how they get around it. I think that's it. I've ran through.
No, you did a great job. You actually came in right under the wire here. I am going to make an executive decision here. We're going to answer some questions. If you need to jump off here, but these are your questions here, and we wanted to make sure we live to serve here. So Don, can we pose some questions to the wizard here real quick?
You go right ahead.
All right, Tara, we've got one.
All right. One of the questions by Jack asked us, they noticed that Strings and Beyond uses Nextopia search to populate their categories. I wanted to know if that was done using JavaScript, or if there's any negative SEO impact when you're doing that.
Well, I don't know if Mike wants to speak up. I mean, I can tell you it's going to be JavaScript that pulls that content into the page. I know I've seen sites that have done that, and they've used Nextopia or a couple others. To me, for an SEO perspective, I will mention that I would make sure that that page itself has got at least a minimum a no script block with links to the products that are on that section, so that search engines have some way of seeing those products. Google can now, navigate JavaScript in many ways, but I don't want to trust that. And so the simple solution is, frankly, turn off JavaScript in your browser, pull up that page, and see what you see.
Okay. Next quick question. How do you offer effective navigation for 12,000 items on a PC and a phone? I don't think this can be done in a responsive layout. Don, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think it's actually a responsive issue. It could be responsive, mobile, adaptive, any of these technologies. It's looking at it on a phone. I think it can be done. Obviously, it depends on what your products are. If you've got a section with 12,000 products, that gets ugly. But honestly, filtering to me becomes more usable as you've got larger number of products than just about most other navigation. You want to get it down so you can navigate to that area. But once you get to an area, if you've got 12,000 products and you've got only 20 sections, you've got 600 products a section. To me, filtering has to be the way to go. And I think you've got different layouts, and we showed some in some of the slides for the filtering on mobile. But I certainly think it can be done. If they want to actually even drop me an email, I'd be glad to even look at the site or give some ideas. But I think it definitely can be done nowadays. And I think it's honestly often a really good way to do it.
Right. We'll take two quick questions, and then we'll adjourn here. The next question is, if you're a Yahoo store and you move to responsive design, how do you track sales? With Unbound Commerce, they can download mobile sales. What's the answer there, Don?
I honestly would look. My first thing would be look at analytics. I would get a Google Analytics installed and have it accurately tracking, because they can break it down by device. They can break it down in more ways than, frankly, you can slice and dice anything. And I think it's a great way to see that. There are some other tricky ways you could do if you didn't want to use analytics, posting some data into the cart and things like this. But honestly, some good Google Analytics install or really any good analytics will be able to give you that information.
Right. Okay. So the next thing is, and this is a little bit related, but go ahead and read that, Tara.
Yeah, it's a little bit off topic, but I think it's a good question that we can answer. Other than, Michael asked this, other than mobile friendliness, please explain exactly why and how the redesign is so much better and worth the 7-month implementation, which sometimes is less. But
well, it took 7 months with mine.
Yeah, and associated costs.
Right. So we've done redesigns. I mean, typically it's about a 3-month process. It's not 7 months as a general rule. But I think the question is a good one. Is it worth it? Mike, Don, do you want to answer that?
I guess I will. I guess I'll say is I don't know how to be the best customer that I can be. So Eric and I, we're going to get in a sweat tent somewhere, and we're going to talk about it. He's going to tell me, Mike, this is how you can be the best customer, and I'm going to do that. So here's the thing. I said it at the very beginning. I mean, yeah, the important thing is we had to bring our entire brand up to date. It was getting stale. It was going on 8, 9, 10 years old, and I keep saying it, but it's so important. We were just like, you could ride it into the ground if you don't change with the times, if you don't make adjustments. So for me, the most important aspect of doing this, and when I came to this realization after I talked to Eric and I considered it, there was no other way. I said, we have to do it now. I can't immediately. It's got to be done. And because I knew that I'm looking around the landscape and I'm like, all these other people are changing every year. I can't change every year, but I can change maybe every few years, every 3 or 4 or 5 years to keep it fresh, to keep my existing customers knowing that, yeah, we're still committed to serving them, and while they still get the same great service, the website starts to look like it's been around for a long time, and then maybe we certainly have to look at the free shipping. And now everybody's giving free shipping. We had it over $35, so we're looking at different ways that we can adjust our pricing to be able to offer free shipping on these types of items. And so we can't just look at our website. We have to look at our entire business and change with the times. If we don't, we're going to be riding the pony into the ground.
Right. Absolutely. Well said. Well, the question from Yes It's Organic, which we reviewed earlier, says, what are the most important elements and layouts to show on the homepage to get the highest response? Actually, I'm not going to answer that. That's going to be answered on the next webinar. It's a kind of a tease for our next webinar. We're going to be talking about homepage layout, product page layout, how to get we can also talk about responsive, of course. So let us know in the comments if you think that'd be a useful use of time here, and if you plan on coming to the next webinar and want to see any other specific topics covered. I want to thank Don, of course. Don, thank you so much for your time. And Mike, you're a heck of a guy, a great friend, great client. Thank you so much for being here. One of the things I love about you, Mike, is you're passionate about helping merchants succeed. You actually have a consulting company in addition to Strings and Beyond. Tell us real quick about that before we get out of here.
I love talking about e-commerce, and I love helping people. It's very likely that I've talked with a number of people on this call today about their business. So we've done it informally in the past. We have clients that pay us, and we have paid clients. We have free clients. You're welcome to email me anytime if you've got questions about your business. We're struggling with this decision, that decision. You help them with design. Don helps them with the programming. I can help them with just kind of general management stuff. And email stuff, I can always review it, look at it, and respond in my in my time, and that's generally free feedback. But there are some paid options if it goes that route. But I love helping people. I love to see people succeed. Everybody on this call, I would love to see you guys be successful in your small business, medium-sized business, or wherever you're headed.
Right, exactly, and that's why you're here, and that's why Don and I are here, is really make sure you guys get the kind of content that you need to run your stores and to make some actionable decisions about your website. So hopefully you got some good tips here today. I want to thank JT and, of course, Tara for being here on the webinar. Let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you next time